Hello everybody, and welcome to my channel. This is my first ever serial killer video, and I thought I'd start off with one that was kind of close to home to me because I live in Canada, I live in Ontario, and this was huge news at the time that it happened, so we're gonna talk about Bernardo and Karla Homolka. I'm gonna start a little bit with the background of these people and their, well, Paul's original crimes. 1987 in Scarborough, there was a vicious amount of attack. Serial rapist was targeting teenage girls. In 1 month, 2 girls were found reporting brutal rapes. Neither of these 2 victims saw the attacker's face. At this time, Paul Bernardo is a 23-year-old junior accountant living in Scarborough. You know, might as well do it in your own town. He was fixated on virgin girls. He was just sick. For years, he had gone on perpetrating these crimes in Scarborough, and he eventually got the name the Scarborough Rapist because they didn't know who he was, and they were looking for him, and they were kind of linking these attacks. So he had a lot of friends and multiple girlfriends over the years going to school, and a lot of the girlfriends broke up with him when the relationship got violent. It was later reported. I'm gonna go into a little bit of his childhood. So he was the youngest of 3 kids, and he apparently had a difficult childhood. His mother was super depressed and apparently verbally abusive towards him. His father molested molested people. And then when he was about 16, he found out his father wasn't his biological father. And I guess that's when he kind of lost it. So he started peeping into his female neighbors' windows while they were changing or at night and just being started his little creep show. And I guess this is when he also started degrading his mother. So I guess because she had him in an affair, he started calling her like a slut, stuff like that. He was apparently very angry at her and started being angry towards women. I guess he didn't care that his father molested anybody. At this point, Karla was living in St. Catharines, and she's the oldest of the 3 siblings, so she has younger siblings. And apparently, I couldn't find a lot on her childhood. She had, according to her family, a normal, great childhood. And she was in high school, and she was doing well, and she started working at a vet clinic after school. Later, this is where she got the drugs to drug her own sister. We'll get to that. So, now I'm gonna go into meeting Karla. This is where it kind of goes downhill for everybody. October 17th, 1987, he meets 17-year-old Karla Homolka at an animal convention. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. He meets her at an animal convention. She worked at a veterinarian shop, so she went to this convention in Scarborough, and I guess as soon as they met each other, they had an attraction. Bernardo was there with his friends. She was there, I think, with her friend. And they just met. And there was a 6-year age difference, I believe, which is quite a big age difference. So they start dating, and he starts driving up to St. Catharines to hang out with her. Her family even likes him. They say he was perfect. They say he was nice. They think he's charming. Apparently he had some weird dream of being a rapper. Okay. Didn't work out for him, obviously. He was dating Karla, and the attacks in Scarborough are still continuing. November 1988, the rape count in Scarborough reaches 7. So there's now 7 reports of these violent rapes on women. He was grabbing women while they were getting off the bus or while they were walking home and just violently assaulting them. And it was progressively getting more and more violent each assault. So it started off he would grope women, and then he began violently assaulting them and raping them and beating them. And he would force them to demean themselves and make them say things like, I'm a slut, I'm a whore, this was my fault. So they began linking that it was the same person based on the fact that he was using the same vocabulary with each victim. So the police started calling this an anger-based rapist, which apparently in the system of rapists is pretty rare, because instead of being just super power hungry or super wanting to be just powerful, he was angry at women, I guess because of what his mother did. So he would hurt them on purpose and make it like it was their fault. And the police were really concerned about this, and because they were progressively getting worse and worse each assault, they thought it was going to lead to homicide, so they were really looking for this guy. One victim saw him, so they started getting evidence together. They described him as a young white male, maybe in his mid-20s, and kind of good looking. So the police take over 100 DNA samples from possible suspects in the Scarborough rapist cases in 1988. They were able to link 4 more assaults with the Scarborough rapist, bringing the number up to 11 of people who were assaulted, which is just sad. So in 1989, Karla graduates from high school, and she's still, with Paul at this point. And the same year, in December that year after she graduated, they went to Niagara Falls, and he proposed to her, and she agreed, so they got engaged. May 29th, 1990, the police released a composite sketch of the Scarborough rapist based on victims' encounters with him and what he might have looked like. So they released it to the media, and it's, in magazines, and it's on TV, and his friends start calling in and saying, hey, he looks a lot like our friend Paul Bernardo. So they get his name, they have his name, and multiple people were calling, ex-girlfriends and friends that went to school with him. Just, they thought it looked like him, so they were calling in and reporting his name. So police call him in for questioning, and they take a DNA sample of his, and his DNA is put on the shelf with the hundreds of other DNA samples taken on possible suspects. So in the 90s, the DNA testing wasn't as good as it is now, so it was going to take quite a while to test all these DNAs and figure out which one was actually linked to the assaults. And his DNA was basically just sitting there. So around the time of Paul's DNA getting taken in and waiting to be tested, he moves to St. Catharines and moves in with the Homolka family, and he is now living with Karla. So the spree of attacks stop in Scarborough, and all of a sudden in St. Catharines there's a spree of attacks on women, and I guess at the time they didn't link the connection that this was the same person. But now we're going to get into the victims. This is probably going to be like the hardest part to talk about, just because of these people being so disgusting. So we're going to start with Tammy Homolka, who is Karla Homolka's younger sister. So she was 15 years old, and on December 23rd, 1990, the family goes to bed, and Karla and Paul invite her to have cocktails with them. And because she had looked up to Paul as a big brother, apparently, she says yes, but she didn't know that they drugged her in her drinks, so she passes out. And they used stuff from the vet clinic that Karla had worked at to drug her, keep her asleep, and assault her, and film it. On the video, Paul rapes Tammy, and then he tells Karla to, and she assaults her own sister. She begins vomiting, and they dress her and call 911 and tell the police that they tried to revive her and that she was drinking. And they take her to the hospital, and on Christmas Eve, the next day, Tammy's pronounced dead. And they didn't think it was suspicious. They just thought it was a tragic accident and that she had drank too much, choked on her own vomit, and passed away. So they never tested her for sexual assault or anything like that because they didn't think there was a reason to. They didn't suspect that there was foul play or anything. So about a month after Tammy passed away, Paul and Karla move into their own house together. The house is in Port Dalhousie, which is a small town really close to St. Catharines. And this is kind of around the time that they start looking for a new victim. So her name was Leslie Mahaffey. She was 14 years old. On June 15th, 1991, 2 weeks before their wedding, Paul apparently wakes Karla up and says, "I have a surprise," and it's 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey. He had abducted her from her backyard. He offered her a smoke and she went to take it, and he put her in his car and took her home. So their initial intent is to keep her as a sex slave. So the couple begins repeatedly assaulting and raping Leslie Mahaffey. So while doing this, everything's recorded on videotape. Paul liked to film everything and keep it as a trophy. And about 24 hours, less than 24 hours later, they strangled her, dismembered her body, encased them in cement blocks, dumped them in a near lake, Lake Gibson. June 29th, 1991, Paul and Karla get married. And on the same day, Leslie Mahaffey's body is found in the lake. They find the concrete blocks. These fishermen find them, and they find her body in the concrete blocks. The details of this murder shocked everyone. It was all over the media. Just how brutal, how insane it was to think that someone could dismember somebody and just throw them in a lake. In St. Catharines, the St. Catharines Police Department, still, they haven't related the cases of the Scarborough rapist to Leslie Mahaffey's death yet. So it's still a different suspect than who they thought was the Scarborough rapist because nobody has connected anything together yet. So apparently also around this time, Karla was bringing over her sister's friends and they were drugging and raping them on videotape as well. None of these girls, fortunately enough, they didn't die, but they didn't remember the assaults either. They would just come over to drink with Paul and Karla and then pass out. But there was video evidence later showing the assaults of some of these girls. April 16th, 1992, Paul and Karla go looking for another victim. So they aren't far from their home at this point, and they see 15-year-old Kirsten French walking home from school, and they stop in a church parking lot a little ways away from the way she's walking. And apparently Karla gets out and puts a map and calls her and says, "Excuse me, can you help us with directions?" And Kirsten goes over to help, and they force her into the car and take her to their place. So at this point, Kirsten's almost immediately reported missing when she doesn't get home from school, and witnesses start calling in and reporting this white Camaro and two suspects. They say they saw two people abduct her, but the police at the time didn't realize that the white Camaro lead was a false lead because people misidentified Paul's car. He actually drove a gold Nissan and not a white Camaro. So all the tips coming into the police about white Camaros in the neighborhood weren't relevant at all because it wasn't his car. Paul and Karla kept Kirsten French for several days, sodomizing her, raping her, just torturing her, again, filming it. They eventually strangle her and discard the body. On April 20th, 1992, Kirsten French's body is found in the town of Burlington, really close to the cemetery where Leslie Mahaffey was buried about a year ago. So going to January 1993, Karla's actually put in the hospital by Paul. He had beaten her with a flashlight. So she had 2 black eyes, a cracked rib, and severe bruising on her body. At the same time, the DNA from the Scarborough rapist is finally processed, and they find out it's Paul Bernardo. They link him directly to the Scarborough rapist case. It took about 2 years to actually do the full DNA testing. So at this point, investigators start slowly realizing that he might be connected to the murders as well because of the towns the murders were happening in and where the bodies were found. So they're kind of putting the case together, but they don't really have evidence yet that Paul is actually the murderer and Karla was involved. So the police contact Karla and they tell her that they've identified her husband as the Scarborough rapist. So at this point, Karla thinks they're coming to talk to her about the abuse, but they're actually coming to just kind of let her know, hey, we might have linked you to the murders. So they don't really fully question her or blame her. They just have the investigation team of the murders there. So apparently after this interview, she tells her family everything. She tells them the truth. She tells them what happened to Tammy. She tells them what happened to these two girls. And they advise her to get an attorney, so she does. So at this point, Karla gets her attorney and starts blaming Paul for everything. She's like, he did it. He's responsible for the attacks. He's the one who killed these girls. So it goes on, and she finally tells the police about the connection. February 17th, 1993, Paul Bernardo was arrested. They ended up searching his house for 71 days for the videotapes. So at this point, Karla has her attorney arrange a plea bargain with the police. The deal was basically for her to testify against Paul because they couldn't find the videotape. So at this point, the only thing they have to prove he did it is Karla's word. June 28th, 1993, Karla appears in court for her charges. Her attorney at this point is portraying her as a beaten and abused wife. She receives 2 12-year prison sentences, but she's serving them concurrently for the charges of manslaughter. They end up calling this the deal of a lifetime. So finally, May 18th, 1995, it's day 1 of Paul Bernardo's trial. He ends up pleading not guilty to the charges against him, the 9 charges of kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. At this point, the 6 videotapes, there apparently are more, but 6 videotapes are found. And while police are watching them, they realize that the story Karla has told about being not that involved is all been a lie. In the videotape, she's seen participating in the attacks, the assaults. She raped her own sister on video, and she didn't seem that all forced to do it. She just did it. The people are outraged, and the police say that the plea deal never would have been made had the videotapes surfaced prior to the fact that she made this plea deal, and they needed her basically to put Paul Bernardo away. So it's later revealed that Paul Bernardo's lawyer, Ken Murray, was actually concealing the tapes and hiding them from investigators, and he was actually charged with obstructing justice because he was hiding evidence that was vital in this case. So June 19th, 1995, Karla appears in court to testify against Paul. And at this point, the videotapes are being played as evidence. So she claims that it's battered wife syndrome, but again, like, the public's outraged by this. They don't really believe her side of the story anymore. The judge allowed the attorney and the jury and Paul to watch the tapes. The audio was only played for the public. They never got to actually witness the tapes, which is probably a good thing. September 1st, 1995, 31-year-old Paul Bernardo is convicted of all the charges laid against him. So this includes 2 counts of first-degree murder. He is sentenced to life in prison, and while he's in prison, he actually admits to Tammy Homolka's death and 14 cases of rape in Scarborough. After the tapes were released and people found out about Karla's involvement in the murders, they started calling it the deal with the devil. And they were very upset that she just basically got to walk away free. 12 years didn't seem long enough. I agree. So July 4th, 2005, Karla is released from prison. And she's now living in Montreal, and she changed her name. About 2 years, a little bit less than 2 years after she was released from prison, she gave birth to a baby boy. Good luck explaining that one. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the videotapes now. I'm just going to read some quotes from a few of them. Specifically, the fireside transcript, that's what it's known as now. It's just a videotape of Paul and Karla basically having sex, but they're also talking, and it's pretty much what solidifies to me that Karla wanted to be involved and that she should have got more than 12 years, because she just walked away with, in my opinion, just a basic slap on the wrist and got away with killing her own younger sister, assaulting her own younger sister, hiding her freaking death, and continuing helping Paul rape her sister's friends and abducting other young girls. So she definitely should have got more than 12 years. The fireside transcript was actually played in court as evidence against them. Karla was already sentenced at this point, but it was used to convict Paul Bernardo of the killings. So it takes place filming in the basement of our home. And I'm just going to read a couple things here quickly. So this is apparently not long after Tammy's death. And she's naked, Karla's in the camera, and Bernardo's directing her and telling her what to do. And Karla seems happy and under no distress at all. Bernardo joins her on the floor with drinks, leaving the camera unattended. Karla continues to say things like she's horny when her husband's around, etc., and they're drinking. One of the quotes that appears a lot is Paul Bernardo calling himself the king, and her calling him the king. Apparently this was also something he said to his victims when he was assaulting them. He got them to call him master and the king and stuff like that. So this is one of the things she said. I bet Tammy would have loved to lick your ass. I loved it when you put snuffles up her ass. So she doesn't seem all that upset that her sister was raped by her husband. You know, her 15-year-old sister. Also, his dick snuffles. I loved watching it. I felt proud and happy. I felt horny. It's my mission in life to make you feel good. I'm glad you made me lick her. Blank. I had fun doing it. You know I liked it. That's pretty much all I'm going to read from the fireside transcript. If you want to read it, I will link it down below in my description. It really kind of bothered me and made my skin crawl, but I really wanted to include the fact that Karla is definitely guilty of helping. She wasn't just this, you know, beaten wife who just was scared and had to go along with what her husband was doing. She actively participated in killing her younger sister and actually offered her as a Christmas present to Paul because she wasn't a virgin. So she wanted to give her virgin younger sister to Paul to please him. So some of the information given about Leslie Mahofy's tape includes Leslie Mahofy screams hysterically and pleads for her life on a chilling videotape shown to the court. Apparently at one point her blindfold was coming off and she told them to put it back on because she didn't want to see his face. She told him, I didn't see your face, let me go, I won't tell anybody. I can't imagine what the family's going through. I don't understand how Karla is not in jail longer for this. Apparently jurors cringed and looked away while the videotapes were being played, rightfully so. I probably would have as well. Didn't actually get to see the tapes, only the jury and the judge and the lawyers and Paul got to see. So then, during the tapes of Kirsten French, she actually challenges him a couple times and calls him a bastard, but it actually just leads to him getting very angry with her and hurting her more. So as far as I'm concerned, he got what he deserved when he got life in prison. He recently tried to go for parole, and this was giant news in Canada. He said he cried every day and he really regrets it, but he actually was denied parole, again, rightfully so. And I guess Karla's just living her life, and I'm surprised she's decided to live in Canada because anybody here who knows her hates her, and she killed people's family members. And I just wish she got more justice was served for her. I wish she was in jail longer. I don't feel that in her case she got the right amount of time, but this was more an informational video for you guys, so you can tell me what you think in the comments, and also recommend any new killers you'd like me to watch or research, and I will do so. Thank you for watching. I will be trying to upload more interesting killer docs. I started with the Ken and Barbie killers, that's what they were called, because they were so close to home with me, and actually my parents met Leslie Mahoffi's father, and that's how close to home it is. I live in Ontario. I live not far from Toronto or Niagara or St. Catharines or any of these places, and I really wish they both got life in prison because that's what they deserved. And thank you so much for watching.